Yeah, the call wild's always bringing me home. Call wild's always bringing me home. Call wild's always bringing me home.
All right. Well, hello, wild ones. Welcome to another episode of the Find Your Wild podcast. I'm so excited to have Mike Phelps with me today, wildlife photographer, also a podcast host of the Wild X podcast. And you have a couple of other things that you're doing, Apex Adventures as well. It's so nice to have you here. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. Like I say, it's lovely to be this side of the microphone for once, so I can answer the questions. People don't realise it's hard work when you're doing research and sorting out what questions you're going to ask guests and that. So, yeah, it's nice to be on the other side.
Yes, and I'd like to especially thank Harry Turner for introducing us. So thanks, Harry.
Yeah, thank you. What a guy, can I say? You know, he's
yes.
an amazing guy. What he's doing.
He was so nice, especially when I first reached out to him. And he's like, so like, what kind? Because I reached out to him before I had a bunch of episodes even released yet, and he's like, so what is this podcast even going to be about? And then I told him, and he's like, oh, okay, great, I can recommend a bunch of guests to you. And I don't know, it was just so great and so nice for him to be able to connect, and we've connected, you know, in a couple of other different ways, and hope to help him with his really amazing charity too.
Yeah, and our podcast as well has linked with Emerald Arch, and that's the charity that we're supporting. You know, it works hand in hand. You know, Wild X is all about nature and how it helps mental health, and ultimately that's what his charity is. You know, it's helping people that are struggling, getting them into nature, and ultimately it's also saving a nice piece of the rainforest.
Yeah, it's so many good things, and connecting in that way. It's so nice to be able to help each other, right? And to promote that mental health journey. So I know that photography is really where your heart is at, and where you really find your peace. For people listening that don't know you yet, when did you first start that journey into photography?
So I did a bit of photography years ago. It wasn't wildlife photography. I worked for a construction company, and the boss of the company bought a Nikon. I think it was something like a D3 400 or something like that at the time, and thought he was going to go out and take these amazing photos. He then realised that it was quite awkward to take good photos, and all the settings complicated things, and it soon became apparent where he was sort of like, I'm not taking these photos, there's too much involved in it, and threw it to the young guy in the office, which was me. And so yeah, I started taking some photos of projects and things like that. Learnt my way a little bit around a camera, but didn't follow it through any further than that. I've always had a massive interest in wildlife, and I've been going out and looking for wildlife since I've been as long as I can remember. My uncle took me to see the peregrine falcons nesting at a place not too far away when I was 5 years old, and that really had an impact on me. But it was actually through having a breakdown that I got into photography. And I mean, I'm absolutely fine talking about the story, what led up to that. Unfortunately, when I was in my early teens, my parents split up. And it was quite unusual because we was left with my dad at home, and I watched my dad's mental health drop very, very quickly. And at that age, I knew what was going on. I was old enough to understand, but probably young enough, too young to do anything about it. So I saw my dad's mental health decline, and unfortunately, one evening he decided that he didn't want to be with us anymore, and decided that he was going to end it all that night. And unfortunately, as a young teenager, I had to go down and witness that, which, as you can imagine, has a massive effect on someone. And I went into shock, and yeah, had to deal with all that. without going into too much detail, we managed to save my dad, and he's still around today, thankfully. The problem was I never dealt with it at that time. So with my parents splitting up and then me going through that with my dad, I should have gone and got some counselling at the time, and I didn't. It was hushed up. We didn't talk about it, and I blocked it out of my mind for years and years. I didn't talk to anybody about it. I was with my wife for years and never spoke to her about it. And then all of a sudden, there was a small trigger, and it was quite insignificant. And I could feel all these feelings and emotions from back then coming back quite quickly. And my mental health started to deteriorate quite quickly. And I was showing all the classic signs of somebody struggling with mental health. I became withdrawn. I started drinking quite a bit of alcohol. And I know some people drink alcohol to numb the pain. This was more because I wasn't sleeping. I was trying to have a drink to get me to sleep. But then when you do that, you fall asleep, but then when you wake up, my mind was ticking. So I was waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning, all these thoughts going through my head, started to shake, and lots of all the classic signs that the people that are struggling, I was showing. And then one day it all come to a head, and I literally just had a breakdown, and it all kept spilling out, and I could not stop. I couldn't stop crying. My wife was sort of like in shock, so like, why haven't you told me about this? But ultimately, I was signed off work. I got some support and I got some counselling, which was really important. But my wife gave me the best bit of advice. She said, "You love wildlife so much, Mike. You're off now for 3 months. Why don't you go out, take the camera that I'd bought her that she'd never used out, and try and document wildlife?" So that was my journey into wildlife photography. And if I'm honest with you, what a brilliant piece of advice, because that therapy and the therapy I was getting from doing wildlife photography was probably the best, and still is the best therapy I could get and can get. So that was my journey into it.
Yeah, it's so powerful too, right? Like I think of so many different things. I'm a mom, so it's like this aspect of seeing our parents as human and struggling is one aspect of it, right? And then also just mental health wise, how the more we hide things and try to suffocate them almost and put them in the back burner, actually is worse for us than being able to actually piece it out and work it out, even though that is very hard and sometimes traumatic in the moment to work through that. How important it is to get the help you need, especially to talk to somebody for therapy, and then just finding a good positive outlet as well, like you said, through photography is so important.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And unfortunately, you women are much better than us guys at reaching out and talking about things. And, we as men don't like to show our vulnerability, our vulnerable side. Sometimes our pride gets in the way. We're not very good at talking when we're not feeling good. Women, and I'm not saying this in all counts, but women as a rule are better at talking to their female friends and opening up, where in the past especially, men who were struggling with mental health years ago, I mean, in the construction industry, they would say they had a bad back. They would never say, I'm struggling with mental health. Things are getting better, but there is a massive stigma around mental health. And I always say, I see some friends who play football and maybe they've had a bad accident on the football pitch. They're quite proud to show their x-ray when they've broken their leg in their hospital. But I bet not one of them would say, do you know what, I'm not feeling good. My mind's a little bit broken. I'm going for therapy now and putting that on. And that's the difference. So it's really important that us guys, and everyone speaks, but also that other people recognise the signs and start to open up a conversation to somebody who necessarily might not want to talk about it.
Yeah, and give them like a safe space, right? Because that, like you said, there is such a stigma around men's mental health too. There's just like you said, this viewpoint that, being a man, you shouldn't, like, express your emotions, you should just keep going. But that in turn, I remember reading is like, you get all these other side effects, right? Like short, like temper, and
Hmm.
it comes out in different ways. So you're not really dealing with it. And I think it makes you more of a man to be able to be vulnerable, but to take that stigma and flip it around is very hard, because it's been throughout history that it's like, oh, you just gotta move through it, work through it, just move on. But therapy is so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you need to get a good therapist or a good counsellor, and they are sometimes hard to come by. But when you do get a good counsellor, it's absolutely, 100% a fantastic way of getting better. For me, obviously, alongside that was the wildlife photography. And if I'm honest with you, that's why I'm so passionate about both of them. I will use every platform possible to say talk about wildlife and nature. And I'll also use those same platforms to talk about how important nature is, because it helps us with our mental health. And that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to scream from the rafters. And you mentioned then about sort of like, showing men showing their emotion. I'm terrible now. I mean, my children are walking, or they're getting older now, but my kids come in sometimes and they're like, "Oh, Dad, are you crying again?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's really happy though, this bit." I'm quite an emotional person. I wear my heart on my sleeve. It has its positives and its negatives, but yeah, I am not afraid of showing my emotion, because I know now, by locking it away like I did for years, how much, how much of an impact that can have negatively on you.
Yeah, and I'm sure, and your family has probably noticed and felt such a difference in you. And I think that the focus too as parents is, when we heal ourselves, that we are also creating such a better space for our children, and for the people around us. And the more that we heal ourselves, actually, I think that we actually go and heal the world, because you don't know how many people you affect, and especially like bringing awareness to it and being able to spread that, um, being able to come from a place of that journey of having a hard time, and reaching, a climax of, I'm in such a better place, let me pull you up, let me help you. So you can only do that, right? It's like the oxygen mask on a plane.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you
I
can
mean,
only help others unless you help yourself.
my wife said, I was an absolute nightmare, and the best way she could describe it was she just felt like she was treading on eggshells all the time. My temper, I did have a short temper. The littlest thing would trigger me to have an argument. So yeah, I was probably well, I was an absolute nightmare to live with at that during those periods. Luckily, I have a very, very understanding wife, and she sort of like knew what was going on without knowing the reason. So yeah, and ultimately, we're lucky if we have got someone that understands and supports us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, got diagnosed with bipolar disorder a couple years ago, and I've been in therapy now for probably like 5+ years. But I mean, I've felt a difference and known a difference. Not every day is obviously like perfect, but getting the help that I need, and going on, something that it, like a pill that's helping me, and even like my husband recognizing the difference, and how hard I've worked on my own mental health, that's helped our relationship too. And it's being so important to have someone, and for people listening, to be able to recognize those signs in your loved ones, because sometimes, like you said, you didn't tell your wife about your struggles, and then her sort of recognizing it, right? Like, so to be able to recognize the signs of that, and to try to push somebody to help, um is probably the best thing you can do.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I do some mental health talks now. Like I say, I'll use any platform to bring up the subject. And in those talks, I often talk about, a lot of people focus on that person that is going through mental health issues. But we've also got to make sure that we're looking after the people that's around them because, you know, in the workplace, somebody might be struggling themselves because their wife or their husband or their son or daughter he's got serious mental health issues. I talked to one company about it, and some guy opened up after we'd spoken, said, actually, at this moment in time, I'm really worried because my wife is saying she's going to take her own life, and I'm worried every time I go home from work what I'm going to find. Now he's opened up, the managing director of that business was totally aware then that he's in a really tricky situation. So what they did is bring in another manager to support him. So at any point during the day, he could then leave work and make sure that his wife's okay. So it is really important. We talk about sort of like the people recognising signs, but also recognising if a friend or family member is dealing with someone that's got serious mental health issues, how much of a strain it is on those.
Yeah, it's right. The support system needs support too, and
Yeah.
because we're all so connected, and especially the love that you have for those people, um, is something that we need to also focus on. Right? It's not just the people that are struggling, but then in turn, the people helping that person struggling could also be struggling.
Yeah.
So it's something that just as simple as being able to be there to listen and understand, because you don't know what people are going through on the other side or at home.
And just giving them that little, probably if it's a work colleague or somebody that works for you, just giving them probably that little bit of flexibility, that would probably relieve a load of pressures that they're going through, and worries that they're worrying about. They're probably worrying about their job and the person that they're living with or their friend.
Yeah, absolutely. And for, companies, like you said, going forward to be able to, give that support to your fellow workers, recognizing maybe if, something's happening in your family members, just to be able to be aware, look for signs, look for help, and being there for other people, because you never know when you're going to need it. Like I think a lot back to our like primal ancient past, right? And how we were all grouped together, and especially with children, the phrase is always used, it takes a village, but I think that it still takes a village just to survive, right?
Yeah, yeah, it absolutely does. Just going back to a point that you said there about, the workplace that needs to understand the things. I remember quite vividly when my dad was really struggling. At that period in time, there was no help or support for anyone struggling with mental health. His work was fully aware that he'd just gone through a separation and his wife had left, but they was hounding him every day. That why are you not at work? And then somebody would say, well, apparently you were seen out walking about, so if you're well enough to walk about, why can't you come into work? So there was just no understanding back then about somebody who's struggling. They might be able to function and do things that we do in normal day life, but mentally he was absolutely crushed to the point where he didn't want to live anymore, and they were still putting pressure on him to come back to work. So things have got a lot better than they were back then. So hopefully this will continue.
Yeah, it's amazing how far we've come from the point of things like that, where work takes. I understand why, we need to live, right? We need to work, we need to make money to be able to support our families, but being able to give grace and recognizing our human counterparts and our fellow people, and to be able to give that grace and understanding, especially in the workplace, because it's sometimes like, well, I have to work, I have to provide for my family, and that continued pressure is not going to help that person get over that hump. So giving that understanding and grace is really important to hopefully help somebody get a leg up to continue on helping their healing journey.
Yeah. And, it's proven that mental health has a real negative effect on businesses financially. So it's in their best interest to deal with things properly. I can't remember the stats now, but I did it on a talk the once, and, it's billions and billions of dollars where you are, pounds where I am,
Yeah, yeah.
that is lost because of mental health. Now, businesses really should start thinking about that and thinking, well, actually, if we deal with our staff properly and we're giving them the mental health support that they need, then it's going to cost us less. And like anything in business, things don't seem to get done unless it is having an effect on costs. So maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes we need that science aspect to be, or like the fact aspect to be able to be like, hey, you know what? This is actually in your best interest to put it forward and help your employees. If the heartstrings aren't being tugged at you, then
Hmm.
maybe some facts or showcasing that will, but also talking about science and proven for our mental health, your photography and being in nature. There's so many scientific facts out there now that birdsong helps our mental health, being out in nature helps our mental health. And there's something about photography too that's like the ultimate. You can get a souvenir out of that experience and not have to take anything from the environment either.
Yeah, I mean, for me, photography is probably the best type of thing that comes to mind that will give you everything that you need to sort yourself out if you're struggling with mental health. And I speak to that many photographers that have struggled in the past, and photography, wildlife photography in particular, has actually saved them. But it like you said now, it's scientifically proven. If you're out walking in the park, in woods, next to a river, around a lake, you will get chemicals released in your brain. Serotonin is released, which is a feel good chemical. But why wildlife photography is so good is because you're also doing physical work because you're walking around, so you're getting, your physical health. But then also, if something really special comes into view and you get a photo of it, you then get a release of dopamine. So that's another, people pay a lot of money to get that dopamine hit, and it's free. Wildlife has all the answers, and I think that's why I love it so much. That feeling that it gives me. You feel so peaceful, and then all of a sudden you get this big rush. I don't know, let's just say, and this amazing owl comes and perches next to you, and it doesn't know you're there, and you're getting these amazing shots of it, or you're filming it. And for me, it's just I just keep on going back for more.
Absolutely. And it's like the hard work, right? It's the waking up early, usually, right? For a lot of wildlife, it's like, you have to wake up early and you have to actually get up out of your house. And, for some people, just that fact alone is hard enough for them to do. So that motivation to be like, what's out today? What can I try to find? And then, going out, and then actually you're there, you're in nature, and you're walking around. And then when you find something that's amazing, when an animal comes out in front of you, you're like, oh man, this was so worth it, to be able to witness this.
Yeah, and it's also important because it's probably one of the only times I'm a little bit, well, I am ADHD, so my mind is literally all over the place all the time. I've got a million projects on. It's the only time that I can switch off and literally forget about everything and focus on just seeing that piece of nature, or that getting the photo or the image of certain wildlife. It's ever so strange to explain how it makes me feel, but it's just sort of like a calm place that I can't get from anywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. And um just the fact that, like you said, you have to focus, it clears your mind, right? Like you're just focusing on that animal or the subject that you're trying to capture. And the best part about it is it doesn't hurt the environment because you're just taking a picture and you're just gonna go about your day, and the animal's gonna go about their day. Um, it's a win-win.
Absolutely. And I've been lucky enough now that, I've become that involved in it. We do a podcast. We've started a business called Apex Adventures where we're taking people around the world to different locations and helping them get not just amazing images, but incredible memories. And although it was such a horrible dark period in my life, if it wasn't for that period, I wouldn't have this path wouldn't have been there for me, and because of that, now I'm very lucky that I can say this is what I do for a living now, and I go out most days with a camera looking at amazing wildlife. So my mental health is absolutely fantastic now because of that.
Hi, wild ones. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Find Your Wild podcast. This episode is brought to you by my clothing brand Femme Sauvage, and I'm going to link that in the description below, along with a little discount code for you. Be sure to check it out. We also donate $5 with each of our animal designs towards specific charities. I will also have those in the description below. And enjoy the rest of the episode. Thanks so much for listening. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, right. Like, I'm so great now. I'm doing what I love, my passion. It's so great. And speaking of your Apex adventures, I saw that you guys you've been to Iceland, Mongolia. What other
Yeah,
places?
we've just come back from Norway, so we was out there filming, well, goshawks and golden eagle, but unfortunately, the golden eagles wasn't playing ball. They went on holiday for 10 days, and
Of course.
we just happened to be there whilst they were on holiday. So, but I'm going back there in a couple of weeks' time. So yeah, and then when I'm back from there, I go to Iceland and we're filming and photographing Arctic foxes.
So
Um,
cool.
and then Adam is off to Spain to do some bird photography. We've got lynx photography and workshops in also in Spain. Isle of Mull, which is a place in the UK, and it's the most beautiful little island in Scotland that we take people to, and it's like going back 100 years. There's single track roads. There's eagles flying around, both white-tailed eagle and golden eagle. There's owls coming past you. There's otters running along the kelp on the shore. Last year I was lying in the kelp, literally flat down next to the lock, one leg in the water, one out, and an otter come running towards me, and literally just didn't even know I was there, and it jumped off the rock and literally straight over my camera and my head, landed on my back, and it just run off. And you just think,
Wow.
wow, how lucky am I to have this experience? And we want to share these experiences, and that's why we formed Apex Adventures, so we can get other people out there and show them the right way to do it, because there is a wrong way of doing photography where you're putting your photos in front of the subject, before the subject, and that should never be the case. You should always put the wildlife first. So we focus on teaching people the right field craft so that they can approach a subject and not get too close, but close enough for a photo without disturbing them. But the
Right.
one thing we talk about a lot, and a lot of people do this, they get the image, and then what they do is go, right, I've got my image, stand up and walk away. Well, you've just done all the hard work of not disturbing it. You've got the image, and then you've just disturbed it by getting up and walking away. So we try and say it's really important to use that fieldcraft, not just to get to your subjects, but also to move away from them as well. So yeah, it's teaching people how to do things the right way when they're out in nature.
Yeah, in November, so a couple months ago now, I actually visited my friend. She's a wildlife photographer and guide in North Carolina, and there's this place called Alligator River, and it's like a national preserve. I think wildlife preserve, but she's very focused on the ethics of the animals, and rightly so. That place in particular is very special because those are where it's like one of the very few places where there's the wild red wolves. So I was lucky enough to be able to see them very, very far off. I wasn't
Wow.
able to get a good picture, but I was able to say that I saw them, which was incredible. But we did encounter a couple of people that I was lucky enough to also have my first wild animal experience, wild owl experience, and a barred owl was just on the side of the road and was very comfortable, I guess, because they were used to cars. But we encountered this group of other photographers, and they were like whistling at the owl and like trying to get that good shot. And my friend Aspen was like, I could tell she was getting unnerved because
Yeah.
it's also hard because these guys, they were a bunch of guys, and we're just a couple of like girls. So it's like, how do you like bridge that and like the respect and focus on the just taking a picture, but not being able to focus on actually the animal living their life, not having to disturb them for your shot. I think that the best part is being able to just observe their natural being without trying to disturb them. That's the magic I
Yeah.
personally think of wildlife photography.
And talking about that point with you saying, two females when there's a load of guys there, and it is hard to broach subject. I seem to get away with it by sort of like telling people off. I don't know why. Is it the way I look? I don't know. But what I would say is the best way to deal with that is education. So just by going over to those people and saying, look, guys, just to let you know, this barn owl uses sound to hunt its prey. They can hear the heartbeat of a small rodent. That's how sensitive their hearing is.
Right.
By you whistling, shouting at it, it will have an effect on that owl and it won't be able to hunt. And I suppose that way then you're not telling them off or telling what you're using a little bit of education, but you're also getting your point across, so to say, shut the hell up and respect the wildlife.
Right, exactly. And like we're being as quiet as possible, trying not to, because it's a gravel road. So like trying not to, do that. And like, I feel like it was such a great experience because the owl was like tolerating our presence, and then they were bothering it and it ended up flying away. But, it was giving us like, I don't know what better shot you could have wanted anyway, because it was really giving like I got incredible pictures from that. So to just, realize that being in the wild is also very hard, and you can go to the grocery store and get your food, but this owl has to, use every bit of its instincts and power in its body to be able to feed itself. So
Yeah, and barn owls struggle a lot. They can't really hunt if they get wet, and a lot of them starve to death. They find it really, really hard. But just going back to that whistling to get the photo, the best photos that win all the awards or look the best are the ones that are natural. So
yep.
why would you stop a bird doing something what it's doing naturally? Just so if it's looking at you, I mean, I have got pictures where animals are looking at me, but it's not because I'm calling. They're just looking in that direction as I'm taking a series of photos. But ultimately,
Sure.
the best photos I love is when you're getting that proper natural behaviour. If it's, a little hare and it's cleaning itself with its paws, or, it's a beautiful bird of prey that's cleaning its tail feathers, then that animal is nice and relaxed, and ultimately that's when you get the killer shot, as they say.
Yeah, and it's just like it makes for a more dynamic picture, like, also usually, and I think it's just more interesting that you just want to be a fly on the wall to see and witness that. And I think that that's what makes wildlife photography so beautiful. And to just make aware that, you don't need to get a certain shot, and by just observing their natural behavior by not disturbing them makes for better shots anyway.
Yeah. Do you know what? You go to some of these other countries. I spent some time in Mongolia last year, and we're going again in 2026, so next year.
Mhm.
And the locals there, I mean, they were absolutely incredible. I fell in love with the place. They haven't got a lot. They're living in what they call gers. I would call them like a yurt.
Mhm.
And they're just so happy and friendly, and the respect that they've got for nature. And the guide that we go with out there is just doing so much for wildlife conservation. He's pretty much, him and his wife, she's doing lots of studies on Pallas's cats on the steppe, the Mongolian steppe at the moment. He's taking people out there, and the money he's raising from going on photography trips, he's going directly straight back into the conservation. He's educating the shepherd, so he's also doing something which I thought was amazing. So now, if say a goat is taken by a leopard, he then goes to the shepherd. He gives them money for that goat. And what that does, it stops the shepherd wanting to kill the leopard, so it's protecting the leopard. The shepherd is reimbursed, so he's not losing out. But also, cleverly, it gives him a location of where the leopard is. So then he can take people who are paying him, that's going back into conservation, to that location. So we had an incredible time out in Mongolia. We was climbing the mountains up to sort of like 10,000 feet.
Wow.
The first part of the trip, photographing, which you can probably see behind me there, that's a male snow leopard that we actually, it took 3 days to get out there, but then just before we got to camp, he got a call from a shepherd and said one of the goats has been taken. He got the location, and we literally had to get changed into all our Arctic gear out in the mountain, and then we hiked 3 hours, and then literally just got over the brow of this hill. We just lay down there, and literally across the other side of the valley was this beautiful male snow leopard just lying there, and I couldn't believe it. I never thought, growing up and watching wildlife documentaries, the world's most elusive cat, I never actually thought I would see one with my own eyes, and to actually see that lying there with it at the back of my camera, I was just, it was so emotional and just so incredible. So we did that in the mountains, and then we travelled right to the other side of the country, and the temperature dropped to -40. So we was living out in -40, which was fantastic because we was having snowstorms and the vehicles were getting stuck, and we was having to dig them out, and it was just such an adventure. But it was life-changing for me, and I fell in love with the place. And I should imagine there's going to be a lot more countries that I go to that will have that effect on me, but that's just one that stood out to me. What an amazing thing.
Absolutely. And I love, to go back, I love that cycle of positive conservation, right? Because, that's the thing. I think I've talked about this with a lot of different people, and I know I've talked about it with Harry too, was that, the people that live there and, are struggling with these, the goat getting taken by the snow leopard, to find these positive cycles of conservation is so important. It's like such a good feedback loop to everybody. At least the shepherd is getting compensated because he needs to feed his family and support himself, but at least the leopard is also being, protected, and your guide being able to establish that loop in general is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and some of these shepherds are now also tracking for him as well. So, everybody just adores this guy because he's done so much for, not just the wildlife, but also for the community. He's bringing people there. They're getting, they'll get little tips. They have also got an extra source of income, and it wasn't that long ago when I used to watch David Attenborough documentaries on the telly, and the BBC used to go out there. They would be out there for probably 7 weeks before they even spotted a leopard. It took me 3 days to fly out there, but within 3 hours of being in the sort of like local area, we was up a mountain and watching that, and that is all credit to people, like Oggy, that was doing all the work out there and finding the leopards for us, and it was incredible, absolutely incredible.
Oh, I'm so glad you got to have that experience, and that it's amazing how one person, right, is able to help a whole community and animals at the same time. It's very inspiring. I love that.
Yeah, I can't say it's one person. It's definitely two because his wife is doing
Okay.
just
Yeah.
as much as he
Yeah.
is. She's the unsung hero. He goes out, takes everyone out there. She's got a PhD in, the conservation, the welfare of Pallas's cats. So she's doing really important stuff, studies and things like that. But he gets all the glory for it.
So it takes two people or
Two
a
to
village, but
tango. Yep.
it's amazing the impact you can have just on you know, like a family or one or two people to be able to help a whole community and the wildlife is so amazing. What are some other places that you have in your mind that you'd like to try to go with Apex adventures?
So we've just got in touch with someone out in Sri Lanka because we'd like to take people out there. It's amazing for wildlife and especially leopards, not snow leopards, but our normal leopard. So we'd like
Right.
to do that. I'd love to go to Canada. I'd love to go to Alaska. So
Yeah.
I'd love to do the grizzly bears on the salmon run, sat on the side of the river filming the bears. Svalbard is another one, so getting out up there, something that we're looking at. So, polar bears and musk oxen, that type of thing. I mean, there's so many places when you start thinking. I'm
Yeah.
I'm massively into reptiles as well. And we haven't got any tours that really focus on reptiles, and that's the one thing I'd love to do. I know people out in Thailand that are doing, taking people out and showing them all the amazing reptiles that they've got in their jungles and rainforests, and it's something that I would love to do. I kept and bred carpet pythons, which are an Australian snake, for years and years, and I used to do a podcast all about reptiles, if I'm honest with you. That was actually more popular in America than it was in the UK. But we did
So funny.
99 episodes, and we interviewed people all around the world that was involved in herpetology and reptiles. And so that's one thing that, yeah, I'd like to do. I'd love to go out and film and photograph some like eyelash vipers and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
I went to there. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but there's this event called Animal Con and it takes place in Florida. And I went in October, and it was so much fun. And I don't remember. I feel like maybe I held a snake when I was like little kid at like one of those like birthday party type things.
Yeah.
But I got to hold like a couple of snakes, and I have like a whole new appreciation for how cool they are. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, I kind of really want one. But my
Yeah.
husband's like, listen, you have some ideas for, your business and everything. I'm not taking care of them while you're away.
And snakes
So,
get such a raw deal in the animal world. Us humans aren't very kind as a rule to snakes. The amount of people, that straight away as soon as you mention them, they think they're these slimy, horrible, bitey creatures, and to be honest, they're. I mean, we've only got one venomous snake in the UK, and it's called the adder, and it's only tiny. It's venomous, but it wouldn't kill you.
yeah.
And it's a real shy animal. People have been walking their dogs around these areas, and they're only in small and a few areas in the UK. People have been walking their dogs for 20 years and didn't even know they were there. But the way that they're portrayed, and I don't think the media help either.
No.
There's some of the stories that come out that this killer adder. I mean, there was one in the paper that said this adder. There was a woman that went to a grocery store, come out with a cooked chicken, and this adder literally dived out of a bush and tried to bite her, and it's because it could smell the cooked chicken. I was like, you don't even understand reptiles. That if you did, you wouldn't be saying that. It just wouldn't happen. These things
Right.
are literally like 18 inches long. How could they bite somebody on the elbow from the floor? It's bizarre, but I don't know. I suppose things like that
Yeah.
must sell newspapers, but it's so infuriating because all it does is make that reptile or snake look like it's something it's not.
Yeah, it's so this year is the year of the snake, and
Yeah.
I did I did a post for my clothing brand about, and I was like kind of doing my own research about different myths and things throughout history about the snake too. And it's so interesting the way that like ancient people, like they had, it went from actually being like so well enamored and loved and actually being like a huge representative and symbol of the feminine, and then it being kind of turned on its head and all of this negative viewpoint. So I'm sure that there's like that history that unfortunately brings a lot of that negative viewpoint of snakes as well, being like demonized, being a symbol of like evil, in like Christianity and things like that. But the fact that they're actually very important to the environment. On that same trip down to Alligator River, my friend was like, "Oh, watch out! There's cottonmouths, which I think are also, I don't know, venomous or something like
Yeah,
that."
yeah, and they love the water. Yeah.
Yep. And I walked, and it was funny because I stepped right in front of it, and it just opened its mouth, and I heard it, and I was like, "Oh my god!" And I was like, "Aspen, there's a snake there. It's right there." And she was like, "Where?" And she's a guide, so it took her a second to be able to find it. And this guy he opened his mouth and be like, "Hey, please leave me alone.
Yeah.
Like, please don't step on me. I'm just trying to do my thing." And didn't move, and just like had his mouth open for a second and then moved away,
And that is him just saying, I don't want to bite you. I'm
Yeah.
opening my mouth to say, get away. I don't want to bite you. Their venom is so precious to them. The last thing they want to do is use it up on trying to get something to go away from it. They want to use it so that they can eat.
Right.
So yeah, it's quite an incredible story that is. But yeah, I mean, I love them. I love them.
Yeah, I think they're cool. I think that eventually in my future, I'll rub my husband enough to get me one. So.
Well, I don't have any anymore. We used to have a lot in the house especially when I was breeding them. But for me now,
Yeah.
it's getting out there and seeing them out in the wild that gets my juices flowing, and photographing them is incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so you've been to Iceland too to see Arctic foxes. I saw some of those pictures. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Embracing all the elements, right?
Yeah, and that we're definitely seeing changes now. I mean, I went a couple of years ago, and it was the first time that time of year for, well, as long as people out there could remember, that we could actually see the grass at that time of year. It's usually just full of snow. So we arrived there, and it was sort of like a really nice, quite sunny day. A lot of the snow had melted, but then literally within 2 days, we saw the temperatures dropped. We had a storm, filled the place back up with snow, which was incredible. Which meant that we got every type of shot that we dreamed of in a short space of time. But I am seeing lots of people travelling around this year. I say we went to Norway, and it was 5 degrees, so there was snow on the ground when we got there. The second day it started raining, washed the snow away, and it was 5 degrees. Now, Adam, who is a co-host on the podcast, but also who I run Apex Adventures with, he was there exactly the same time last year, and it was -15.
Mhm.
So we talk about, these amazing places, but climate change is definitely starting to have an impact on it. No matter what you think is causing it, some people think it's us, some people think it's just sort of like the natural, the way that the earth fluctuates, and I can get both points. But the fact is, it's definitely happening, and it's happening quite quickly. That this, in the space of a few years, we're seeing places that never, cold places that were covered in snow and you could never see the ground, and now all of a sudden you're photographing foxes on the grass. But sorry,
Yeah.
I went off on a little bit of a tangent then, but
Oh no, no, actually I think that's a really great point to bring up too, and us talking about like cycles. I mean, my thing is, who wouldn't want a clean environment? You don't want to live in a house that's not clean, right? You want to make sure that your environment is clean as well. And I think that I know a lot of your focus on your podcast as well is and what I'm trying to do with my podcast is, like, I love that phrase, like, find your wild. So, like, what that inner wild means to you, and whether that be through photography, through walking, maybe it's just sitting outside, but showcasing that connection to nature and how important it is for us and our mental health, and being able to give back, and kind of like your friends, the guides, and his wife in Mongolia, this hopefully, secular connection to, okay, we get this from nature, right? How can we help nature in return? And being able to notice that, because there is a cycle there, and being able to recognize that, and to hopefully bring that back into our lives as well.
Yeah, I think the problem is there's a hell of a lot of us on this planet, and we're growing very rapidly, and we are taking habitat away from them. There's excuse me, let me just have a little drink. Sorry about that.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
we're taking habitat away from them. We're also, destroying things. I mean, you look at the oceans now and the plastics that are going in to the oceans. Regardless of climate change and the planet warming up, we are absolutely 100%, having a negative effect on wildlife. And I always say to people, people say we're killing the planet. We're absolutely not killing the planet. The planet will be here long after we're gone. What we're doing
Right.
is we're killing a lot of beautiful wildlife that's living on it for our own benefit. I don't know the answers to it, because there's a lot of people. We need to house people. People need jobs. They need to get around. So I don't know what the answer is, but what I would say is that if everybody just educated their friends, family, children about how important wildlife is, then maybe we can make just a few small changes in our lives that will
Yeah.
help, the plastic issues that we've got in the seas at the moment. The microplastics out there is, horrendous. The mess that's washed up, in some countries, beaches. Ultimately, that's all going into the sea, and a lot of people are eating the fish that come out of the sea, so we're destroying ourselves. I heard not long ago that somebody literally was just only ate fish, and I think it was like her mercury levels had gone through the roof. And as we know, mercury is really, really poisonous to us, and that's because that's what's going into our oceans, and our fish are eating it, and ultimately then it's going into us.
Yeah, the nature is like out of balance, and to recognize that importance. I think that there, I always say, and I've said this a million times, but on my podcast, so sorry, listeners, but there isn't a one size fit all, because there's so many complicated issues, and that can get daunting and overwhelming. But I think, like you said, just appreciating and focusing on what's around you is such a start. And if you could make a small change in your area, or do a beach cleanup or something like that, I think that that's just a little thing that you can do to make a difference and make an impact. Um, and then hopefully, you never know who you're going to meet or connect with, that could have a ripple effect, and help animals somewhere else, or help somebody somewhere else start something else. So yeah.
Yeah, well, we're quite quick. When we're living the way we live, where we have our own houses, we have cars to get around, we've probably got one or two or three tellies in the house. It's quite easy for us to look at other countries and saying, look, they should be doing this, they should be saving that rainforest over there, they're cutting down the trees. But we interviewed an amazing guy called Rob Pilley, and he's a producer and director for the BBC, and he does wildlife documentaries and has worked with David Attenborough. And he was saying, when you're actually out there and you see these people and how poor they are, and they haven't got a house, and they haven't got two cars on their drive and three tellies in their house, how can you tell them that they shouldn't be chopping that tree down when it's to feed their 6-year-old daughter?
Right.
It's so easy for us to point the finger But when
Exactly.
you look at our carbon footprint, they could turn around and say, yeah, okay, I've chopped down some trees, but your carbon footprint, you fly abroad every year, you've got, the emissions from your car, this, that, and the other. So I do think we need to just look at ourselves, understand why certain things are going on. And, Rob talked about it's all about educating the local people and finding possibly another revenue for them so that they can earn money a different way. So rather than chopping down, ecotourism, although it does have its problems, it is so
Yeah.
important because that person then who's chopping down trees and, injuring or killing animals that live in those trees is now taking people out into the woods to look for wildlife. you know that's the way that we should be focusing things,
Absolutely.
educating local people, but also looking at ourselves as well. If you can make some small changes with regards to what you buy, where you buy it, and how you dispose of it,
Right.
then I think if everybody did that, then we're going to definitely have a positive effect on the environment.
Yeah. Absolutely. I am going to recycle this. Talking about so many plastics, I do recycle. I just want to say that.
See,
um,
what you really need is a Wild X mug so that you
yeah.
can just wash it up and and use it again.
Exactly. But yeah, so I also think that that's such an important point with a lot of these things when, we point the finger but to, kind of like we've talked about this podcast is, about mental health and to, you know, people are struggling in these countries because they're so poor and they're just trying to, make way for their family and survive, right? And we use that as an example. You can't help others unless you help yourself first, and they're not going to be able to be focused on that because they are struggling themselves. So if we can find these, creative ways to help other people, then that in turn also helps the wildlife and the environment. And I think that's such a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, I can't add anything more to that. I think you said it perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, but yeah, I think that there's hopefully creative solutions out there. The more, hopefully people can be more creative about things. And just like we were talking about, bringing awareness and, um, just I think that's a really big thing too, to just bring awareness to people and know what's going on, know that this is out there. And maybe they have a creative thing to be able to help. Who knows?
Yeah, and I think ultimately, the our podcast and your podcast, we are doing our little bit. We're trying to educate people. We're trying to reach out, to bigger audiences so that we can, use platforms, whether it's to talk about mental health, whether it's to talk about nature or the environment. You know, as I said right at the start, I use every platform I can to scream from the top of the houses about, how good wildlife is. And it's just a shame sometimes I see some people and they're just so unaware and just not bothered about, nature
Yeah.
and they don't realise, I've got a friend of mine and he keeps bees and,
Mhm.
if bees went, we wouldn't last very long at all.
No.
If we lost insects, it wouldn't be long. The whole planet, well, we as a species would just disappear. And I don't think people understand how important it is. It's not just because it's nice to look at. They have a
Right.
really, really important part to play in civilization and us living on the planet. But a lot of people don't see that, and I think that's why just doing more education to tell these people how important it is really important.
Yeah. And how truly connected we are, I think that in modern times we are very disconnected from the fact that we're animals and we've grown to this place, not just, um, you know, our ancient ancestors were truly one with nature and, hopefully we can bring that back with our little piece of awareness and just, um, being able to showcase how we can still be one with nature and appreciate nature and focus on our connection and how connected we are with wildlife and animals.
Yeah, and I think, you was just saying there about back in sort of like, ancient civilization, and it just got me thinking then about a mental health thing, and I've have a little have a little thing that I have a reason why I think we're having a lot more mental health issues nowadays, and we didn't years ago, and that is because we have become so disconnected from nature. I also think technology has a massive part to play in our mental health struggles. Everything needs to be done so much quicker now. You can't go anywhere. Even when you're on holiday, people can connect to you via your mobile phone, and you can read your emails on your phone. So that is also having an issue. But as a species, if you think about how long we've been on the planet, which is quite a small time in the grand scheme of things, but how long we've been on the planet and how quickly technology has sped things up in the last, let's just say, in the last 50 years. I think technology is it's advancing us so quick that we can't cope with it. And I
Mm.
honestly think that is why our mental health is struggling so much more now than what it used to. I don't think as a species we've had time to catch up, if that makes sense.
100%. Yeah, I totally agree as well. Yeah, that's a good perspective too. I think that that makes a lot of sense to I almost feel like we have to disconnect to connect with
Hmm.
nature and ourselves again. Even like you said, just photography wise, right? The hard work that goes into that. It's almost like with technology, there's this lack of, I mean, obviously like doing things sometimes takes hard work, but the fact that it's almost easier, right? It's not this physical hard work that
Yeah.
has to happen. It's so much in our head and mental that it's all that pressure that I think definitely affects our mental health.
Yeah, and social media. Obviously, we're a
Yep.
big part of social media, but I think it's really important, especially as a wildlife photographer, is to be honest and tell the truth. So I try and use stories for a number of reasons. I use Instagram to showcase my photography. I use YouTube to tell the story, but I use stories for people to get to know me, but also to tell the truth. So a lot of people, let's just say there's young people getting into photography, they seem to be looking at mine going, oh my gosh, he's out every single day taking these amazing photos. But I use my stories to say I've been out in the pouring rain for 14 hours today, I'm freezing cold, and I haven't taken a single photo. And I think that's really important because people look at social media sometimes and they get a story that's not true. And yeah, we
Right.
all want to be known as being these amazing photographers taking amazing pictures of wildlife. But ultimately, you also got to show how much hard work goes into those getting those images, and that they don't just happen all the time. A lot of people say to me, "You're so lucky," and I say, "Well, it's not luck. It's just the fact that I've been out for 100 hours. Me being out for 100 hours, at some point, I'm going to
Right.
get some images, and when I do, I take full advantage of that, and I literally will take a whole load of photos, and then I will edit them over a period of time and release them. But it's important for
Right.
people to know that. So yeah, I always think that we should be really, really honest about, what we do with regards to photography and how we get the images, because it can be having a negative effect on someone else who sat there thinking, I can't get out and get photos like that.
Yeah, the honesty is important, right? We always want to showcase, it's this stigma again on social media. You don't want to just post like oh, I'm really upset today or something like that. People, I don't think there's this thing that people are like, oh, look at me, I'm sad, but um or I'm having a bad day or whatever. But I think it is important to, I posted something a while ago, like where, I was just having a rough time, things are happening with like my son and it's just it can be hard, but we don't necessarily have to go into all the details of that, but just to showcase, hey, you know what? today's not the best day for me, but I'm
I'm
being
having a
honest.
crappy
And
day today.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, I think the truth is so important.
Yeah, and ultimately, when I was going through that real dark period and I was getting my counselling at the time, when I was going out with the camera, I started up an Instagram account and I just started being honest on my stories and saying, look, I'm out today. I've been signed off work. I'm really struggling with my mental health. But you know what? So many people connected to me because I was just being so honest, and it was quite powerful, really. I was using it, if I'm honest with you, as a tool for me to sort of like talk about my problems to literally a camera walking around, a nature reserve. But ultimately, by putting that on my stories and sending it out, it was quite amazing how powerful it was. And some of the messages I got back was phenomenal. And ultimately, I've got a lot to thank for that. For my account grew quite quickly and got quite big. Not in the grand scheme of things with all these big influencers, but for me, a little guy, well, a fairly big guy, but who wasn't from anywhere, didn't do anything, famous or anything like that. For me to just open up and be honest on a story and people to be able to connect with me over that and get lovely messages was amazing.
I love that so much. And I love your kind of hashtag, or your saying is like friends, not followers. And I believe that a lot as well. And that's been, my main journey with this podcast and with my clothing brand was really just as an outlet for me as a mom to be able to kind of connect back to myself and have some sort of something for just me. And it's harder as we're getting older as parents to make friends and to connect with different people in that way. So to be able to do that, and I love connecting with people. I love when people reach out in my inbox. I mean, that's really what the passion is behind that, and being able to connect with like-minded people. And I think in turn, especially for you, um being for men's mental health, and showcasing that and being honest and true to what you were going through. People want that connection, and living your truth, and being and having people being able to reach out, and being able to talk about that is such a first step in breaking this stigma around that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because you mentioned that friends, not followers. And ultimately, that's how Wild X was formed. So there was myself and Andy Green and Adam Dukes all knew each other on social media, had never met before. And then Andy reached out and said, I'm doing a bit of a trip around the UK. I'd love to meet you in person. I've got a little wildlife area. He said, could I come? So we sat in the hide, the two of us, and do you know what? We did not stop talking all day, and we got on straight away. And he said to me, I've got lots of amazing friends, but they don't get what I do. They don't understand it. So sitting with someone who loves wildlife photography and loves nature, it's amazing. Like, I just feel like we've really connected. And I said, do you know what? We know so many people on social media who would be fantastic friends. We should try and form something that would encourage people to meet up face to face rather than just via a screen. It just so happened then that Adam Dukes had literally said the same. Can I pop up and to your wildlife area? And I met Adam, and then we arranged between the three of us like a conference call, and we sort of like started talking about arranging things for photographers, wildlife photographers, to meet up, because we've all got the same things, we've all got the same interests, and I think it'd be great to connect. And then off the back of that, then I said, look, I used to do a podcast on reptiles, but my passion is wildlife in general, conservation and photography. Would you guys be up for doing a podcast? And straight away they said, yeah, 100%. And ultimately that's what we're all about. We talk about friends, not followers. I love meeting people face to face. A lot of people nowadays don't do it as much as we used to. It's very easy now to connect to people via social media. I know people who are really good friends they've actually never met. And I think, what a shame. You're really good friends via social media, but you've actually never met them. So
Right.
we really try and push people to meet up. So if we're talking about it, we should be doing it. So I reach out to so many people like, I'd love to meet up. Where are you based? Do you want to come to my wildlife area? Can I come up to yours and you show me your wildlife places? And I think that's really, really important.
Yes, that connection is important for us as humans for our mental health, and being able to do that. It's just such good energy being spread out into the world. So thank you, Mike, so much for being on today, and I really enjoyed our chat. Tell people where they can follow and listen to you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on. As I've said all along, I'll use any platform I can to spread the word about mental health awareness and wildlife. So thank you for that, Brianna. It's been a pleasure to be on and talk to you.
Same.
People can find me. So my personal Instagram account is at Phelps Photography X. We also have the Wild X Photo Instagram account. So if you type in at Wild X Photo, you'll be able to see what we're up to and who we've got on the podcast. We have some amazing guests, and we've just done an amazing recording. It's not gone live yet, with a guy called Morton Hilmer, who is a very, very well-known wildlife photographer on YouTube. So we're really excited about that. And then if anybody's ever interested in coming away on a wildlife tour with us, it's at Apex Adventures. So that's our thing. www.apex-adventures.co.uk is our website, and you can click on there and it's got the full itineraries and all the tours and the prices and everything.
Yeah, they sound absolutely amazing. I'll make sure to link all of your things below so people can easily access.
Thank you.
But thank you so much again, Mike. I really appreciate you coming on, and
Thank you.
I love what you do.
Can I just say one thing? And I totally forgot because I'm new to it, but I've started a YouTube channel as well, which I'm sure you'll put up. But I'm just starting to document my tours and getting out into nature and putting proper videos together. So that's Mike Phelps Wildlife Photography.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And I'll make sure to link that below so people can watch as well. And yeah, I can't wait to see what else you do and listen to some more of your podcasts. I'm very excited.
Thank you. And I think it's brilliant. It's brilliant what you're doing as well. Absolutely fantastic.
I really appreciate that, Mike. Thank you. And it's been so wonderful to be able to connect. And thank you so much, everybody listening. And we'll catch you on the next one. Bye.
Flowing to the sea, I feel the energy of life force flowing all through me, and I'll allow it all to dance with my body and play, and no one could ever convince me to give my power away, 'cause the motion of the ocean, it fills my